I have also pressed record.
And now I've hit go live. There's already one person watching. Interesting. All right.
The fool.
It's Thursday, August 8th, 2024. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about fragrances. Feelings that go into your nose. So, on the way home today, I encountered a situation of environmental storytelling on the subway that had a surprising outcome. So I get on the subway, and it's really crowded and really hot, and everyone's kind of surly because, it's raining, and it's been raining for like a week and a half now in the city. I'm on the 7 train, and there's an area that's kind of open near the back of one of the 7 cars, so I think, well, there's probably a problem over there, but I only have to go a few stops, so I'm going to shove my way over there. I shove my way over there, and I encounter what I first believed to be one kind of situation, but then by inspecting and regarding the scene before me for a few minutes, I was able to figure out what had actually happened, and then I felt okay standing there. So what I see is a well-dressed individual who appears to be asleep, and they appear to have peed themselves a lot, and it has run down their pants and run down the subway car.
Did they have some sort of a diabetic attack?
So I assume this at first, and before I do anything, I just regard the scene.
Some sort of seizure of some kind?
They seem to be sleeping peacefully like normally, but then I noticed something.
They were just very drunken midday?
So then I noticed something. There was the individual was holding a napkin in their hand, and their hand was sort of sitting near their crotch. And then I noticed that if you follow the trail of liquid, a Diet Coke can has rolled away. And it was very obvious that what actually happened is this guy fell asleep and spilled his Coke on himself in the worst possible place. And anyone who sees him thinks the worst, unless they notice the Coke can and the rest of the situation around him.
Well, I mean, I imagine it would also smell like sugar and not like pee.
Diet soda doesn't really smell like anything in my experience. Like it just has this like
I haven't made a habit of smelling it, but I know it doesn't smell like pee.
I have, because I had a friend in high school, I will not name, who shared something horrible. One of the reasons they drank diet soda as opposed to sugared soda was that, and I'm quoting this individual as exactly as I can remember from the year 1997, if you spill it, you don't have to clean it up because it doesn't get sticky like sugar. Yep, just gonna let that one hang out there.
I guess if you want to just live in squalor and filth.
There's a lot to unpack in that statement.
Okay.
But anyway, there's some news, and we don't need to dwell on this one because I think it's obvious. So, of course, Geek Nights formally and officially endorses Kamala Harris and Tim Walz for president of the United States. Like, obviously.
I mean, I would endorse the potato. Or, whichever one.
I'd endorse a guy who is coming at me with a knife because at least he's only going to get me and maybe a few other people.
Barring some sort of revolution, constitutional changes, a flip-flop of which party is which, like what happened many, many decades ago.
Yep.
Somewhere in between Lincoln and FDR, right? when there was a flip-flop of which one was which.
Yeah,
right?
The party of Lincoln turned into the party of literally the opposite of Lincoln.
If it was 1870, it's like, it'd be like, let's vote Republican, bro. Come on.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I'm still mad that when I was in elementary and middle school, when you get to learning about the Civil War and Reconstruction, they always have the section on the radical Republicans, and they tried to push too far. But if you actually read what the, quote, radical Republicans were doing back then, it was just perfectly reasonable, good stuff that would have been good for everybody.
Yeah. Anyway, so it doesn't really matter who it is, but I will make it the small note that this vice presidential candidate guy from Minnesota,
Tim Walz, who a lot of people have never heard of except weirdos who pay a lot of attention.
Oh, I mean, I had heard his name before. I didn't know that much about him, right?
Well, because he's famous for, in a red state, barely winning office and then doing a whole bunch of really good stuff as fast and hard as possible.
Right. He's just a funny old guy. But the one thing I did know about him was that he is slightly less pro car than you would imagine from a Midwestern white dude
Ah.
governor, right? He signed legislation to basically give people money to buy e-bikes and things of that nature. And also he signed legislation to make, what's known as complete streets, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is also good. So it's like he is I'm sure he's not like me saying ban cars,
Yeah.
but he is less car than probably even the governor of New York. Right? So
Yeah. But there is some more stuff going on here because him being on the ticket, like now that it's kind of finalized and we know who's going to be running, polls have turned around a little bit. And even though everyone who listens to Geek Nights knows that it shouldn't have mattered the names of the people on the ticket, all that matters is the policy of the power-seeking coalition, and the platform of policy for these two is not different from the platform that Joe Biden would have had. It's the same platform, same ideas, same stuff, same substance. But Americans are the way they are, and just the fact that it's different younger people who are perceived differently and are talking in a different manner and are campaigning in a different way has actually materially shifted the race. Like polls are shifting pretty rapidly.
Hey, good. Play to win.
Yeah, play to win the
They're not
game.
doing. They should do more play to win, right? It's like, hooray! They did a little bit of play to win, and look what happens. Maybe they should play harder to win.
And they seem to be playing harder to win, and that's just the thing I want to point out is my news that
it's a low bar.
It's a
because the other team has been all in on play to win for decades, our entire lives, right? So.
But the tactic they're using that is like I read a bunch of essays over the last week that are talking about how weirdly effective this is that they basically they're calling Trump and Vance weird. And they are weird. Like they are weird. But no one seems to have realized that if you call it out openly like that, it's actually super effective, because if you call someone out for being a fascist, their response is nah, and they'll you're being hysterical. But if you call someone weird, it's actually really hard for them to fight back against that, especially if they are weird, because whatever things they say to appear not weird are gonna be weird.
I mean, they're out there believing in conspiracy theories and all kinds of crazy nonsense. It's like, yeah, it's.
And the article I read that really put a fine point on this talked about how in countries outside of the U.S., people who have had to fight dictatorships have learned this very internally. And I think also, I would hazard, the Jewish people have internalized this to a great degree. One of the most powerful weapons against evil people is humor. Humor is a really powerful human weapon, and humor's working here.
It's always
because JD Vance apparently fucked a couch, and even though that's probably not true, that's what's making the news, and it's kind of working.
Well, I mean, it's something that else has always been true is that Trump is not a person who can tell a joke, nor does he laugh at a joke.
Nope.
Right? He is a humorless individual. It's these weirdos, fascists, whatever. The only thing that they find funny is harming other people, just like the bullies in your high school that vote for them.
Yep.
Right? So,
but the thing that freaks them out almost more than actually losing power is being laughed at and ridiculed. Like that like hits them right in whatever they have for a soul.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as, like I said, bully in high school.
Yep.
Right? It's like, Nelson goes a ha, but as soon as he gets a ha, yeah.
Are you making fun of the size of my automobile?
That's right.
So, that aside, you got any news?
I do. So I have this device, which is the Teenage Engineering EP133. It is a noise-making, sampling, composing device that Rim must never have. Because
I forgot you had that until just now. You talked about it on Geek Nights a while ago, and
I didn't want
to get one, and I just didn't.
Do not do that. And if you do, you must never touch it in my presence. But yeah, it is a fun music audio making device that I do not regret purchasing. However, they have just announced a different but basically 99% same device.
Oh my God, I just clicked on the link for your news. I want this more than I wanted most things.
For the same price of $300, they have released the EP 1320. And, and this one is basically the same fucking thing, only it is themed in the medieval fashion.
You got a Tractus button and a Pocus button? Oh my
Right.
God.
It basically does the same exact thing. It's the same exact device, the same buttons, the same everything. The LCD the graphics on it have been changed, and obviously the colors and aesthetic of the device have been changed to now be medieval in fashion. Instead of being preloaded with very reasonable electronic music, drum samples, right, and synth samples and whatnot, it is loaded with, sounds of hurdy-gurdies and Gregorian chants. Obviously,
I note thundering drums.
Yes, you could get those samples and load them into this one, right? It's just the free samples that come with it. They're just WAV files. So, that's not, it's like they come with it, but they're not like exclusive to that. I'm sure you could go and get them from somewhere, right? And the only other differences between the two, the only meaningful technological differences are the new one has 128 megabytes of flash storage instead of 64, so double storage. But all the medieval samples take up so much space that you only have 32 megabytes of storage free for your own samples, unless of course you delete some of the medieval ones, right? And then make room. And the only other thing is that this one comes with a fundamental medieval styled arpeggiator that the old one does not have. They're otherwise identical, same price. They just come with different samples. So that was an unexpected. It's my news only because you would think, like, if this is a pretty recent device. You didn't think a successor or even an iteration or a version of it would come out so soon. It's like a big surprise. But also, the specific direction they went is so far out of left field, right? It's like, there was no way that you would imagine that,
but the fact that not only is it like out there, but it is so like it is crafted way more care than you would expect for a gimmick.
Yeah, exactly.
Like gimmicky things get
it makes
released
me
all the
wonder.
time.
It's like that now that they've made a second edition of this device. It's like, are they going to keep going in this and like have different versions with different themes and different sample packs?
I mean, you can make one specifically and solely dedicated to late 70s through early 90s horror, and I bet that would do real well.
I mean, there are people who've been selling music samples for decades, right?
Yep.
Even on CDs or vinyl records and whatnot. But it's like, I feel like you could make some money if you just put together sample packs that were specifically already set up to go onto this device in a nice way with the correct numbering system. And then, because it's like, am I going to pay another $300 to get the same thing with more memory and a different aesthetic? It's like, no, why would I do that? It's pointless, right? But if they said, hey, $5 for the medieval sample pack, I'd be like,
yeah,
yeah, sure.
This thing just looks so good.
It's it is a fun device that has, it does not have the capabilities of some other competing devices. I forget the exact, like the Roland sampler machine thingy that's way more powerful. The main feature that this thing lacks is resampling ability. So what can happen is like, normally it's like, okay, you take a sample, you would play you'd sequence like, some beats, right? And then you would take that, that beat that you've sequenced and sample it to make a new wave file that you can now play with a single press. And now that would now sort of expand what you can do. You could now sequence the whole thing that you just sequenced, right? And also save in terms of the resources available to you, to make new sequences. You've now sort of reduced that because you've taken a whole bunch of stuff that you put together and now just turned it into a new sample. This can't do that, and other more professional ones, that's like a base feature. But on the other hand, for $300, it does a lot. So,
I mean, if you want to deal with your pulses and your metrum, your ignito.
So how about that?
Yeah. One last little news, partly just because it's the kind of thing that you never really thought actually happens in the real world. So if you didn't notice recently, the U.S. President Joe Biden negotiated with the Russian Empire a prisoner exchange where basically
Yeah, they do this every once in a while, right?
Yeah,
the
but
last time was for the basketball player.
Yeah, but this
Grindr.
one was a much bigger one, and it was kind of historic for a number of reasons. But basically, we got back a bunch of hostages, and we gave them like literal assassins that we had captured.
Hey,
and by
you know what though? Good job capturing the assassins.
For
Like
sure.
whoever's the assassin capturer. Wow, it's like the fact that we even captured an assassin at any point. It's like,
Right?
damn, that's pretty good. It's like, because you think about it, it's like, what did they do? They just took some normal people hostage, like journalists. It's like, that's not very high skill. That doesn't seem difficult.
Yeah, but
right?
if I
It's
got
like,
Go-Go 13 locked up in my closet and then I send him to jail and he
right,
makes it
that
to
tells
jail,
me that our people are much more skilled at capturing than they are, right? It's like, how come they haven't captured? I mean, it could be that they haven't captured American assassins because we don't have assassins.
Yep.
'Cause we're not evil assassinators.
I mean, we used to be. We definitely used to be. Full
Oh,
disclosure.
absolutely. At least, or if we are right now, we're really good at making sure no one knows it. We're just, right, but they're assassinating and they're not good at it. So, anyway.
But so the story basically two of the prisoners who were swapped back to Russia were deep agents living in Europe. They were living in Slovenia, posing as an Argentine couple, but they were actually Russian spies. But
they were for real Russian spies. They were like, these are people that are like, yeah, Putin's awesome. I'm gonna spy for him and help him out.
Unregistered, because there are spies who register with countries, and that's like kind of accepted. Like the U.S. will say, hey, this guy's coming to the country. He's going to live here. He is a spy. And Russia will be like, okay, thank you for telling us. This is our spy. And of course, there's more spies we don't tell each other about. But so these two were for real spies. They got captured. They had children, and they were living in such deep cover that their children did not know that their parents were Russian agents and were now sent to Russia where they have never been and do not speak Russian. And they are Russian citizens, and they can't really ever leave Russia again, at least not for the foreseeable future. And according to reporting from multiple news agencies, including CNN, they learned of this as they were being driven to the airport to be sent back to Russia.
No, I can't wait to read those kids' biographies.
There is no universe where these kids don't tell their story at some point.
If this was a best-selling novel for the drugstore, one of those kids would assassinate Putin.
Right? But anyway, things of the day. So I saw a picture of this plane. I'm making this my thing of the day because one of the things I'm kind of weird about is I like to learn a lot about fighter jets and bombers and aircraft and military aircraft and that kind of thing. Just the thing I'd like to know a lot about. And I didn't actually know. I'd heard of the XV-70 Valkyrie, but I didn't know what plane it was. It's just I knew it was a bomber.
Yeah, I don't know about all I know is that there's a bunch of planes that the U.S. Mostly NASA makes and any plane that says X at the start.
Yep.
That's some kind of test plane that they made one of. That's some crazy heroic daredevil test pilot flew for NASA one time.
Yep.
And they never made a bunch of them. And
a lot of those things are like the one model rocket I made as a kid that was just a D engine with fins and a nose cone strapped to it.
Maybe it didn't even have a pilot, and it was it's like it's like I guess NASA has just continuously done this of make planes in this X series that are crazy test plane ideas that maybe someone will fly, maybe not, and they learn from that, and maybe that technology gets into planes that are mass produced, and maybe it doesn't.
Yep. So this one did not get mass produced, but
none of the X's do, but it's just maybe technology from them would.
Yeah, no technology from this one got mass produced either. But that's the thing. That's why it's my thing of the day. Independently, yesterday I saw a picture of a plane that looked fake. And the caption was this is the XV-70 Valkyrie. What a crazy plane. And I was like, that can't be real. And I did this video yes, it was real. It looks weird. It was weird. It was a terrible idea. And there's a reason we never turned that into a thing.
The X-planes are a series of experimental U.S. aircraft and rockets used to test and evaluate new technologies and aerodynamic concepts.
So this thing is this weird-looking, crazy plane that was designed to fly supersonic like a Concorde, and it was a bomber. And the idea was it'll fly so fast that nothing could shoot it down, and it just drops its bomb along the way. And it was massive with a weird shape, and it flew basically. It caused sonic booms, which were a problem, but the sonic booms were what were making it fly. Like, I don't know much. That's not a thing I know much about. So this video explains what the hell the deal was with this plane. And you can even see footage of the prototype flying, because it doesn't look like it could actually fly if you see what this thing looks like.
All right. On Wikipedia, there is the list of X-planes.
Ooh.
And they're literally, most of them are numbered, just 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And just at a glance, the notable ones are the X-13 Vertijet, which, yes, takes off vertically like a rocket. There is the X-22, which has, wow, look at those tilt rotors. And I guess the other one that really catches your eye is the X-47A Pegasus, which is a triangle.
This one's like a triangle,
and I guess
with a stick
the highest
on it.
number. Oh, the X-65 Crane looks like something the evil guy in the James Bond movie is going to use. That's from 20. Oh, that's actually the year on that is 2025. So that might be next year.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
So yeah, that's my thing of the day. This thing also, if you look at it, the back of it looks extra fake because it almost looks like a Star Wars thing because it's got 6 engines all crammed together, like in the middle. Anyway, what do you got?
What do I have as thing of the day? Yes, there's an old pun. I'm sure you've heard this pun before, right? Why do fish always sing off key? 'Cause you can't tune a fish. How do you tune a fish? Adjust their scales. Right? What's the difference between a piano, a fish, and some glue? You can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. What about the glue? I knew you'd get stuck on that. Okay, so it's an old pun, but somebody took that old pun and they said, wait a minute, I can tune a fish. And sure enough, they sort of arguably did or did not tune a fish. What they did in this YouTube video is they basically sent electricity through a fish from one end to the other. Because, you know, it's flesh. It can conduct electricity, right?
Yep. I like how it has a warning around like the dangers of this and the voltages pretty early on.
Right. And so, you know, if you sample the fish, you know, if you put electricity near the head end and you get it coming out, you ground the tail end, it'll go through one side and come out the other. And if you were to sample the electricity and sort of close the circuit at different points along the fish's body, you're going to have a different voltage. And so as long as you get your probes in the right positions on the fish, you can then effectively have each probe be, you know, tuned to a specific frequency to produce a specific sound. And then you can sort of play the fish, arguably. Of course, it will go out of tune as the fish dries out or
decays.
You know, the temperature changes, or, you know, it's not going to
I like the section of problems. 1, hard to play. 2, screeches.
Yeah. But you can basically just, you know, no reason you can't MIDI control this fish and just take the voltage out into some kind of amplifier or whatever and hear noise.
Now, to complete the circuit, you play this, and then you send that output to an AM antenna, and then you touch the AM antenna with a hot dog, and that's your speaker.
Anyway, it was just funny that someone went that far with the pun, that they did I guess the closest that can realistically be said to tuning a fish. I guess the only other way to tune a fish would be to get a fish that is capable of making sound, right? Obviously, it would be unethical because most of those are like dolphins and whales. And
unless you trained a dolphin consensually to sing in certain keys, you can make that happen.
Problem is that it's a mammal.
Dolphin's not a fish.
It's not a fish. So you need to get a fish that can make sound with its body, and then somehow tune it to produce notes that are on, you know, key. I don't know.
All right, so way back in the year 2013, we did a show that was adjacent to this. The show was titled Farts. So today we were talking about fragrances. So the other side of that F spectrum.
Yeah, so I mean, basically fragrances are a thing that I never thought about at all in my life, other than when I would walk through a department store and I had to go through the smelly section on my way to the section of something I was actually going to
See,
buy.
in middle school, I sometimes just like to burn incense in my room. There's a thing I would do. Like, it was a nice smell. And also, I wore a little bit of cologne pretty much every day for most of my life until I left college. And now I don't use cologne, but I do wear fragrances on a daily basis still.
There are some things you have that have a fragrance, like the deodorant I use has some kind of fragrance, I guess.
I used to,
whatever.
though. I actually never liked deodorant that smelled like anything. And for most of my life, I used an old Arm & Hammer deodorant that had no smell. It smelled like nothing. It was just antibacterial. And it was great.
I mean, the one I have is also just antibacterial.
But they discontinued it, and I never found one that was quite nice enough to replace it. So now I just wear the Bear Glove.
I have heard about this other deodorant that I don't know if it's actually good, but I have heard things about that are positive. It is called...
Because I'm pretty married to the Bear Glove. I've only worn 4 deodorants intentionally, other than like emergencies in my life. Because once I find one I like, I wear it forever. And 3 times in my life, a deodorant I liked was discontinued by the company that made it.
All right, so the deodorant that I heard of, because it was written about on Wirecutter, is Lavilin, Lavilin. It is a gender-neutral deodorant. It does not have aluminum, alcohol, or bad stuff in it. And supposedly, according to them, it will keep you deodorized for like 72 hours, even if you take a shower or something.
Yeah, I don't feel like I need that. Like, I'm fine with put a little deodorant on every morning after I shower. Like, that feels like it's good enough.
Yeah, but this is, it's a zinc oxide base. Basically, it's zinc oxide that kills all the bacteria. That's how this one works. Yeah. Anyway, but fragrances, I didn't think about them until previous Geek Nights episode. A box of moderately expensive perfumes and colognes just showed up on our doorstep that was meant for a Canadian drugstore in Edmonton. And then I had to sell them all because I tried to give them back and I was unable to. And we just sold them and made a few $100s. Mostly gave them away to people we knew. They were worth like, $100 each. Right? It's like, hey. But since then, it's like, oh, now that, we had that experience, it's like, oh, fragrances are now a thing that like have now entered my consciousness, right? Because I'm not buying any, but it was the thing I never thought about. But now, because I got some for free and had to sell them, I now thought about them.
And I'll say I do appreciate and enjoy a subtle good fragrance on a person. Like, it's just, I've always liked it. Like, I always like to wear a little bit of cologne, but at the same time, I have definitely, a lot of people seem to not understand the concept of moderation and subtle when it comes to fragrances. Nothing is worse. Well, few things are worse than being near someone who is a fan of Axe body spray.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who, are into perfumes or fragrances or colognes, and they put on too much, and it is overpowering to be near the person. Even if they get one that smells really fucking good, too much of it is overpowering. Noses are sensitive, at least if people have a sense of smell.
Well, because it's supposed to be subtle. It's supposed to be like a little accent when you're around.
And it's supposed to mostly be stronger when someone's like really close to you. Right?
Yeah.
Not just, it's like if someone's just standing near you, it's supposed to smell like a little bit. And if they get close to you, then they're supposed to be able to smell it like, ooh.
Yep. I will uncharitably say that I've encountered 3 kinds of people in my life who way overdo the scent. Kind number 1 just can't smell and don't realize they smell that much, which I think increased after COVID. I noticed. I feel like I've encountered people in my day-to-day life way more often who are wearing way too much perfume, and I feel like it might be related in some way. The second kind, people who don't bathe enough and are trying to cover it up, and that doesn't work. Like, just if you're, to be clear, that doesn't work. That is not a successful and effective strategy.
But it is, there is one case where that's an acceptable strategy, which is where you were in a tough spot, right? It's not if you're like a person who just generally doesn't bathe enough, and you're covering it up with fragrances on the regular, fucking take a shower, Jesus Christ. But if you were, say, out in the woods and you got stanky or something, or who knows what happened, but then you have to, on short notice without the ability to bathe or shower, have to appear in public or in a social situation. Maybe you can successfully, avoid a problem
Yep.
by,
But that's the exception. That's more like a reasonable use case. But we know a lot of Geek Nights listeners go to conventions. We know that happens. And then the third kind are, I'm just gonna say, people who are weird and I don't get it. Like they seem to do it on purpose and get mad if anyone complains. I've definitely had coworkers in the past who were like that, and I just avoided them.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing you got to realize is that even if you pick something that smells good, it's not going to smell good to everyone. And it's something you're inflicting on everyone, within a certain radius of you, depending on how strongly you apply it. So it's like, I think in certain situations, it's really not acceptable to use anything, fragrancy that is, over a certain very low strength level, even if it's like a smell that like the majority of people would say is like excellent and they just want to fucking smell it all the time.
Yeah, but I mean, like, imagine if you knew someone who just smelled overpoweringly of fresh baked cookies, like you're standing in a bakery with 10 ovens all going making shortbread cookies.
Yeah, it's like that's great if you walk past them on the street briefly, but it's if they're sitting next to you for like a whole concert or something, right? That's a problem. Yeah.
So from middle school until about, I would say, the year 2003, the cologne I wore every single day was a little dab of Stetson. I always put a little bit of Stetson. That was the scent I liked. And you know what?
I mean, what would you know about when you're that young, right?
Yeah, I mean, I knew of colognes, and I remember going with my parents to the store, and we tried a bunch, and I was like, Stetson, that's the one I like. And I remember that my parents both thought, well, that's unfortunate. He picked the bad one, but whatever. And Stetson it is. Stetson has a reputation among people who care about fragrances as being extremely 13-year-old boys like Stetson, and nobody else does.
Well, it's interesting that actually quite recently, teenagers, boys have been, gaining interest in colognes and fragrances.
Which I'm glad for, because that's breaking down another arbitrarily gendered thing.
Right? It's like I saw like an article about that, like, hey, the kids these days, they're into the fragrances, like, they're using their allowance on the, something in this, these teenage boys on TikTok, collecting colognes and shit. And then sure enough, I was in a cosmetic store, right? With someone else just waiting around, and teenage boys were in the smelly section, smelling everything, right? And I was like, oh, I guess the article was not lying. Here they are, right? I'd never seen that before in my whole life. I don't think that article is what made him do it. So it's gaining in popularity. There's also, I've learned, sort of, there are the popular mega brands and fashion designers and labels that sell expensive ones and fancy bottles, right? You get them at the store. And, those have merit. They're not like all evil or anything. But there's a whole bunch of people out there who are like mega fragrance nerds. And we're not just talking like, obviously there's a whole world of indie fragrances, small companies making custom, small batch shit, either high prices, low prices. There's companies out there who they try to imitate the expensive fragrance, right? And they obviously can't say, hey, this is a copy of the fragrance that's $500 an ounce for $10. They can't mention it, but they do everything they can to wink, like, yo, dog, this smells the same as that expensive thing, only it's way cheaper.
Because as far as I understand, scents can't be copyrighted.
No, it's just you can just get your label, your trademark, and et cetera, right? But you just put the same, you try to match the smell in a different bottle, you're good to go. But then there's nerds out there making their own fragrances. I actually saw like, hey, you can pay to take a class, and in the class they show you like making, it's like, hey, make a cologne or a perfume, and if you take this class.
That sounds fun because it's not intuitive, like the ratios of things and what chemicals you need, not what you'd expect if you don't know anything about it.
Yeah, and you can like take, I guess you could then buy component chemicals. Obviously, it would be expensive if you wanted to use the precious ambergris, but you could get, just use cheaper things, flowers, dried flower. Who knows what you're throwing in there, right? Anything that smells really can be used, right? It's like you think like, oh, I'll make a, vanilla fragrance. It's like, well, you don't just take fucking vanilla extract and rub it on yourself because that ain't gonna work, right? You have
Nope.
to. It's not, that could give you the smell you need, some vanilla beans, but you're gonna need some extra stuff to like get it to stick to your body, right? To emit the smell enough so that you can smell it, but to emit it slowly so that it lasts a long time, right? And then the other thing I've heard a lot about is that, even though, in the bottle, a lot of people, you spray it on a paper and you smell it, right? Different people obviously have different sweat, right? Different skins, different, chemistry going on. So when you spray it on yourself or a different person, the chemistry may or may not like mess with the perfume, right? Or fragrance in some way. So it doesn't smell, even though it smells great to you when you just spray it in the air or whatever, when you spray it on yourself, it might suddenly alter it in some way. Even if you're clean, showered.
Yep. Or it might mix with, like, a lot of people don't think about this. Different fabrics actually have their own scents and will absorb scents in different ways. Like, many of you out there, if you're not like familiar with this, think about the smell of that cheap black suit that you only wear when like you have to go to a special occasion. Otherwise, it's in your closet. That smell will interact with your perfumes, and a big part of why a lot of people wear cologne, and cologne is the way it is basically because it'll kind of mask that slightly off smell of the suit that you only wear a few times a year, the cheap one. But I also, like, not that I'm an expert, like, I only thought about smells I like and smells I don't like, but I always made a distinction between an everyday cologne and the cologne I would wear when I went out to, like, a special thing. And even now, I still have a bottle of my regular Stetson versus the country Stetson that smelled more like formal cologne. But I couldn't, for the life of me, explain the difference between them, but I just distinctly have this categorization of that smells like a formal cologne versus that smells like an everyday cologne. Can't say where that came from. That might just be me, but it might just be partly that I associate with formal events the sense of the kinds of colognes that adults and people would wear at formal events when I was young, and it just imprinted on me.
I mean, if you even if you don't know anything about fragrances, right? As little as I know, it's like there's obviously like, hey, you get a fragrance that smells like, I don't know, a fruit. I love to smell fruits.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, like the bear glove I wear, that basically just smells like apples. Like that's what that smell is.
Right. But you wouldn't want to smell like, apple is not really an appropriate smell for like, a formal ball or something.
You
right?
You want to roll into the opera smelling like bubble gum.
Exactly, right? But, a bubblegum fragrance might be really awesome on certain occasions.
Yeah.
Right? There's also, if you think about in your life, even if you're someone who is not interested in fragrances in general and having a particular smell, right? You just don't want to be stinky. If you think about it, it's like if you have a sense of smell, I bet there are smells that you enjoy smelling, whoever you are, right? And if I think about it, it's like, hey, could I get a fragrance that smells like fucking magic cards or NES cartridge that's new out of the box or old library book, or it's like smells that you like, and it's sure enough, yes, there are not all of those that I've mentioned. I looked for some of those and was unable to find them, but there do exist. I saw one that was like ink smell, right? There's a lot out there for people who enjoy, right? And so that's the second use of the fragrance, is not just to the social aspect of covering up a bad smell or smelling good for others, but just there are people who get fragrances and use them because they want to smell the smell, right? They'll spray it on like their pillow and go to sleep and smell a good smell.
So I have an adorable story from like high school. So I dated a girl in high school, and when I went off to college, we'd already broken up by that point. Like it was a high school relationship, but she asked for a bottle of the cologne I wore so she could spray it on a stuffed animal that I gave her once to remember me.
Okay, well,
but
you can go to the store and buy some.
That's a cute high school thing, but smells are intensely tied to human memory. Like to a degree that we are not going to explain because we're not experts in this. Go read Wikipedia, but it's real. Like this is a profound thing. So
For some reason, the sense of smell is more tied to memory than other senses, right? If I see something I've seen before, I might remember it. If I hear something I've heard before, I remember it. But if I smell something I've smelled before, my brain will like go back and find like the moment that I smelled that same smell.
So broadly,
and,
you know how that
relive
works?
that moment.
How that works is kind of fascinating. I'll get the shortest summary because this is something I've read a lot about over the last couple of years. Basically, your brain is sort of ticking periodically and like linking a bunch of neurons to form memories, and it has this like clock rate almost of forming memories. And each memory is linked to sets of sensations that are happening at the same time, but scents are like they're all arbitrary. They're all treated kind of the same, but because scents are rarer to be strong, and due to a bunch of other factors, you'll tend to remember things where you memories where you smelled the same thing at that time will be connected to each other, even if the only thing connecting them is the smell. And that's part of it. Because our brain just takes this cadence of here's 10 bits, here's 10 bits, here's 10 bits, and then it just makes like this lateral database across those bits.
The point is, if you can get a bottle of liquid that smells very close to or exactly the way something smelled when you had a positive time memory in your life, and you want to evoke that memory again, that is a useful thing to have around, right?
I just imagine the smell of Magic cards and vivid memories of specific times I played Magic in middle school came flooding back into my brain just now. Yeah, just by imagining the smell of a Magic card. But I've seen, I was reading a cool Reddit thread of people who are trying to hack their brains to improve their memory or to otherwise get better at certain video games by using scents to encode and help them remember specific kinds of things.
You probably could do that to some
You probably
extent.
could do that. Think about the old string around the finger. That was the thing before smartphones existed.
Yeah. So one thing I do worry about with, fragrances, right, is that, the fragrance industry has had a history of, animal testings, right?
A lot of it's gone away from that recently.
A lot of it has gone away from that, but it's like at the same time, it's like, we need some amount of testing because it's like, hey, you don't get ingredients when you buy, right? Usually they'll tell you like what it smells like. Oh yes, base notes of this and accents of that. And, and
I
it's
actually
like, okay,
avoid things that don't publish their ingredient list somewhere. That's part of the reason I wear Badger now is my primary sense because they publish full ingredient lists.
Yeah. But some things it's like, hey, you buy this fragrance. It's like, is that harmful to you? I wouldn't be surprised. It's like
I really like the smell of mercury and cadmium.
Yeah, it's like I haven't seen either way, right? Like I haven't seen information that says, yes, this fragrance gave people cancer, but I haven't seen the opposite either. And it's like you have to imagine that like some mystery chemical, like smelling it all day, every day, it's like, or frequently if you're wearing it, a lot, is like, is that, damaging lungs? Maybe not. Maybe it's perfectly safe, right? It's just like smelling flowers. It's not going to hurt you, right? But I don't know, right? It doesn't see, it's sort of an unnecessary thing. Who knows what the hell's in there? It's like, were they, all the tests, were those like long-term tests? I don't think they were that long-term, right?
Though usually, so there are a lot of scents will get a USDA rating that they've been inspected. There's also the concept of, there's a term in the food industry, but also in the cosmetics industry, generally recognized as safe.
Yeah.
Which is a good indication that there's no evidence that that thing is specifically harmful in quantities you would encounter it. Doesn't mean it's good for you.
We don't tell you what's in there, but the things that we've used are basically things everyone knows. There's nothing weird or outlandish, right? It's like,
There's also a really good label you can look for. It looks like a little rabbit sort of jumping, and it'll say like cruelty-free under it. That specifically means not tested on animals.
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, it's like, okay, it's sort of like this, I guess it's a cool hobby if you're into it.
Yeah.
And it's something useful for a special occasion, but it's also something you can safely ignore and save all your money.
Yeah.
As long as you don't smell bad, you can smell like nothing with deodorant only and ignore the world of fragrance as I did until a box of it showed up on my porch.
I would advise, don't put fragrances in your laundry. That just sucks. That sucks. That smells bad. Also, full body deodorant is a scam, kids. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of like, if you want a fragrance right? You should buy a fragrance on its own, right? You should, if there are other things you are buying contain fragrance, that's you generally would like to avoid that,
Yep.
especially things like, a skincare product or a shampoo, or because, those can often, lead to allergic reactions or other irritations or who knows what. I guess, the hand soap by your sink, it's maybe okay for that to have a fragrance in it, right? That could be nice,
Yeah, I like
maybe.
that. I like that to have a little like lavender usually.
Yeah, but it's like, the cleaning spray, maybe you can get a lemon cleaning spray, but it's not really necessary, right? It's
Well,
like,
a lot of
your
times that smells like lemon because it's got acid in it. It's got like literally
Yeah.
concentrated lemon juice
Yeah,
in
sure,
it,
but like your
basically.
laundry detergent, your dishwasher detergents,
I want
you know,
all those things to smell like nothing. That way I can choose
those
what I
things.
smell like.
That's right. All those things you should get ones that don't smell.
Yep.
Um,
My daily wear lately, I tend to I use the Badger stuff, so I'm all about like bergamot, vanilla bean, black pepper, like those kinds of smells.
mhm. Oh, there's one more fragrance related pro tip that
Ooh.
I have learned, right? Is that sometimes there is a bad smell in an area, right? That you must enter the area with the bad smell. Most often a porta potty, right?
Yeah.
Um, now there is a product, but I'm sure you could just get any old fragrance to achieve the same effect. But there is a product called Poopery. And
We're not being
usually,
sponsored.
most of the time, people think about this product, right, or similar products, and they imagine themselves pooping and making a stinky bathroom, and then politely spraying so that the next entrant to the bathroom does not have to experience, right, the odor.
And
And
that's
that is
noble.
that is perfectly legitimate. But people don't often think of this strategy that I only learned within the past year or two of you are about to enter a porta potty, most likely, or otherwise disgusting public bathroom, and there is a smell, but you really got to go and you don't have another choice. You can actually poopery in there, right? Close the door. Wait a second. You have now vanquished most or all of the odor. Go in and do your business. And if you're extra polite, spray on the way out too. And there you go, right? So if you are, if you got like a bag of stuff you carry with you all the time, or if you happen to be going somewhere like an outdoor music festival, that might be something you want to make sure is on the packing list.
The listener just posted the noblest of acts.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, I'll stop it right there.